You are now listening to Creator Corner.
Hi everyone, welcome to Creator Corner. I'm Dalia.
And I'm Mary.
I'm really excited about this episode today, but before we dive in, of course, I want to spend some time to do a brief, vibe check with you, friend. I know it's been a while, so I'd love to just hear a little bit about, how you're feeling today. Is your cup half full, half empty? Tell me about that, friend.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the space to check in, friend, but today a little bit what would I say? Like scattered. I think that's a good word. I think a lot happened at work with managing people, but also trying to really be present today with our episode and just trying to hold the space with you and go into the conversation of our topic today. But I think the word in terms of how I'm feeling lately, I think scattered is a good one. But what about you, friend? How's things on your end?
Yeah, well, friend, first, I appreciate you for sharing that. I know, we're filming this today on a full moon, so full moon energy tends to be a little bit
like
hectic.
What?
But, I totally feel you on that scatter energy. Personally, I'm feeling a lot better in this moment, sharing this space with you. But I would say the last few days I have felt all over the place as well. I've been navigating the job market, dealing with the ebbs and flows of that process, moving forward, rejections, yeses, and it's been a whirlwind of emotions, to be honest. So just been trying to manage those emotions, take care of myself, and just really grateful to have the opportunity to be here with you, friend. So excited about this topic because I think it's very relevant in terms of, some of these emotions around feeling scattered. And some of the responsibility that comes with adulthood that may sometimes distract us from creativity and playfulness. But yeah, do you want to share a little bit more about this topic, friend, before we jump in?
Yeah, definitely. I think for this topic, we do want to dive in terms of creativity in adulthood. In our first part of this topic, we talked about the inner child and creativity. But now I think it's time to really think about our own creativity and creative sense and how it has manifested in our adulthood. So I'm excited to dive deeper into that and what creativity as an adult means like for you, friend, but also just general themes that perhaps we're seeing in the creative space in terms of, again, like how creativity in adults are, I guess, like seeing things through or are now in fruition. So that's a little bit about the topic.
Yeah, definitely, friend. As you mentioned, we spend this initial episode really focused, part one of this series, focus on childhood and creativity. And we talked a little bit about the ways we viewed creativity in terms of whether it was, writing fan fiction or dribbling a basketball, really just enjoying that playfulness and nature of it. And I'm really curious, friend, as an adult today, how do you express creativity in this moment?
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good question. A couple things that first comes to mind is the way I express creativity, I believe is one through like the way I view the world and navigate the world. I think I find creative ways to really perhaps navigate certain situations that I'm going through, whether it's like, again, with career or work, and really reframing that in a creative sense of how am I, how can I create kind of a different like framing of maybe the situation I'm going through. So I think one way that I express creativity as an adult now is, one, through my thought processes, but two, I do think I have a way of writing now I'm tongue twisted. Creatively. What I mean by that is like, I think I express my emotions better when I'm writing. I use a lot of like adjectives. I can really describe an emotion really well when it's written out, more so than I can talk about it, to be honest. I know I've written a few things for like my partner, and it has really like a few love letters and missives for my partner, and I think the feedback I received from her is that she's able to really, like through my words and how I use the words, able to get an understanding, get a sense of like the emotions I'm trying to convey to her. But I think it's something that I haven't explored as much as I should, and I do want to see if there's like a creative writing aspect in me that I need to tap into. But yeah, I think those are like just a couple ways that I think as an adult I've experienced creativity or expressed creativity. But what about you, friend? Like, how do you think you're expressing creativity, practicing creativity right now as an adult?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say it's twofold for me. I consider myself a very spiritual person. So what that means for me is, sometimes I do have like a tarot deck that I'm like playing with and working with.
Yeah.
And I've actually made it a practice for the last month to consistently pull a card, interpret what that card means, and just be creative about that specific message and how it can, relate to my day-to-day. So that's been a small way that I've been, practicing creativity in my spirituality. I think the second way has also been with a little bit of creative writing as well. So I love that you mentioned love letters to your partner. That is so sweet. So like that's very, very
cheesy. No,
but I do enjoy writing love letters to myself as well. Like I'll write a letter to my inner child, to 5-year-old me, to 6-year-old me. Recently, I actually started connecting with 15-year-old me, and that was fun because that actually uncovered quite a bit. But yeah, so creativity, twofold in my spirituality and my interpretation of, my tarot cards, or even in, my connection with the different parts of myself that I'm consistently working on, trying to understand and bring forward in creative ways. Because there's so many lessons from the past that I want to make sure that I'm not repeating, and so finding creative ways to build that connection. But then also, I think I mentioned this a while back, but also looking to try new things that would previously really scared me, and just like, like my sister got into rollerblading, and I started joining her in that, and I typically would hate that, but it's playful, it's fun, it's exciting to learn something new. So really tapping into that as well in the creative process. Of course, this podcast has been great, friend, in terms of being creative in co-creation with you. So I really appreciated that as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think this podcast is our own little creative project. I mean, planning out the conversations, planning out the guests and the type of creative journey that we want to experience with the guests that we have, and even collaborating together with our producer, and in terms of how the episode could look like, and the cadence of the episode does require a lot of creative, I guess, finesse, for lack of better words, to really put a podcast together and have content that we really want to explore together in a creative way.
Yes, definitely. And, I'm really curious, friend, what are some of the challenges that you have faced in exploring your creativity as an adult? And, just the reason why I'm asking you, friend, is, I know we both navigated higher education together. You also went on to pursue your master's in public health. So I'm so curious about, what that journey has been like in academia in relation to also navigating your creativity.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a good question. And I think, creativity, and as I got into like the younger adult version of me, and then eventually, pursuing higher ed, I do think, and I mentioned it a little bit in the last episode, but I'd like to dive in deeper. I think in our, era, it was right in the pivotal moment where creativity was being questioned as like, is this worth exploring as a career path? I think we were right at that cusp when it switched that, heck yeah, it is. But I think I was, and don't get me wrong, I don't regret anything that I've pursued in terms of higher ed, in terms of the path that I'm in. Definitely it's not that. But I do think I leaned more towards of like pursuing traditional, quote unquote, higher paying jobs that, secures you kind of like a traditional like 9-to-5 work, which again, I don't have any regrets. I'm totally fine having a traditional 9-to-5 work. But I do think that academia and the higher ed space really pigeonholed me of like, okay, these are the different career paths that have very viable like salary trajectories and whatnot, which kind of removed me away from that creative space in a way, where I didn't even look at like the arts, I didn't look at like creative, even design, again, I was right at that cusp of the turning point where everything was becoming like, oh yeah, have a, pursuing creative jobs is very much the norm now, with whether it's like more technical in the engineering space, or even more visual in the design space, or even in the artistic forms as well. I think I was just a little bit not far too gone. That's like, it sounds so pessimistic, but it's not that. But I do think I felt more risk averse, and I want to just pursue something that would guarantee me a secure, stable job. So in a way, I think I underlooked and undervalued what a creative career could look like through in terms of artistic expression, which I think, and for me being so logical, it also removed me away from my imagination side. Again, when we go back, thinking back of the inner child episode where I was super imaginative, I do think the world of academia, the traditional antique world of academia, I do think it's very outdated, where you pick these classes and and you just kind of almost told like what classes you should take for this major. It did stunt kind of that, I forget what side of the brain it is, the imaginative side of the brain of myself. So I think it did kind of stunt it in that way a little bit. But again, I'm glad that we do have this podcast now to allow me to reconnect with that creative side of myself through this platform with you.
Yeah, friend, and I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think you touched on a very important point, around, being risk adverse and not wanting to take that risk in terms of creativity. Coming from a background where I'm first generation student that went to college, and my parents came into this country as immigrants. There's a lot of pressure there around, making it out, or being the first one to blaze that path. And I think with that pressure, you don't want to, sometimes it's scary to jump into a creative path that, there's a lot of fear, or,
For sure.
You might have to be working on gigs and not have a steady income, or these like projections onto that. So I agree fully that, that feeling of, that background adds to the pressure to get a steady income, get financial security. Makes us a little bit afraid of pursuing those creative aspects of ourselves. I think also, additionally, creativity is in a way a privilege that has been reserved for folks that have that extra time to paint or to write for fun. And it's traditionally something that, for example, if I talk to my dad who still is working 2 jobs today, and I'm like, hey, let's go paint, let's go do something creative, he's gonna look at me like I'm crazy.
Right, like let him get his rest.
Yeah, so I think definitely creativity as an adult is something that is very interesting. And I think that through academia, through institutions, it is often repressed because we're afraid of, what failure can look like, or maybe projections of what, others mentioned, the lack of stability, no financial security. Like, we don't want to be where we started, or where, at least for my parents have been. So I think I relate to what you shared around taking a more traditional path and being a little bit more logical versus really tapping into that creative, nature within.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I guess since then, friend, what do you think now? I think it's a very different ball game from when we left, undergrad in 2016. How do you think in reflecting back, how do you think, creativity now, since it's such a norm, is going to continue to but going to continue to influence future, young adults who are maybe graduating college or going into college now, even with maybe the pressures that we had as first-gen students? Do you think, I mean, we could only speak for ourselves, but I think it's okay to be imaginative in this way and to have an opinion about it as well. But just curious to hear a little bit more, now that, the creative jobs are such a norm now. Your kind of 2 cents on that.
Yeah. I've reflected a lot about this specific question. You talked a little bit about how the education system's a little bit outdated. And that traditional path from high school to college, there's a lot of value there in terms of us standing here and having this opportunity to have this platform and share our thoughts on creativity. But in terms of at least what I foresee being tech background, there's a lot of creativity that is needed in the jobs that are currently available. So I work in sales, and, I will say the thing that makes me a good salesperson is that I'm creative. I'm not following the standard path of what folks are doing, or the same messaging that others are doing. I'm creative with my messaging. I, try new things all the time. I A/B test. So see what may work, what doesn't work. And this creativity is what actually has led to my success in sales. If I didn't really nurture that and allow myself to try new things, to test something out, I truly believe that I wouldn't be in the position that I am. So I think that there, in this job market, as we navigate the job market from college to having, a career, it does require a lot of creativity. And I wish that was something that I learned about earlier, because I don't just mean creativity with my tech role in sales. I mean creativity in the way that we're networking, creativity in the way that we connect with others. being, some of those lessons that we have learned from creatives, like putting yourself out there, sending that LinkedIn message, making that ask, not being afraid. Like all these different qualities that creatives have are qualities that will make you successful in a career. And I think that is really often overlooked because, one thing that I talked about in the childhood episode was that I had a lot of fear of failing when it came to creativity. And, I can, remember and, like sharing like specific art with my parents, and, it was not really valued because it was like, whatever. But, that aspect of creating something, grabbing it, throwing it away, picking up the paintbrush again, doing something else, and like continuing to try those things and nurturing that creation aspect is so important. You have to continue to create in terms of, new ideas or new ways to reach out to someone and test things out without fear of failure. And I internalized a lot of fear of failure early on growing up, that as an adulthood, I am so proud because I genuinely believe that I've worked through that, where I literally message 10 people and maybe like 4 of them will say no. And then like, 3 of them will say yes. And, that's all I needed. And I am like not even put off by those no's because I'm like, okay, I got those yes. There's a lot of creativity that is necessary for young folks to jump into this changing job market. I also think that with technology advancing so quickly, where we're going to be at in 5-10 years, it is so like it's being created in the moment. And so it does require flexibility and ebbs and flows and not that linear path that was taught to us growing up.
For sure. And I think, one word that sticks out to me when you're talking about like, just the technology and just being creative is the ability to be agile and to adapt to these changes, because I think that is the essence of creativity. It's so defined like as an individual basis what creativity means. There's not really one definition of what is creativity. I mean, if you Google search, obviously there's going to be a like your dictionary definition, but to an individual, creativity is so personal. It's so individualized. So I think, to your point, friend, I think as we move towards, we don't even know what the whole creativity, and we spoke about AI in the podcast before, but we don't even know what that's gonna look like. We're just in the very beginning of stages, and as the technology continues to evolve, so is the meaning of creativity. That is also going to continue to evolve, person to person, creator by creator, and I think we do really need to be nimble and know how to adapt to each different, era or iteration of this creative world that we live in.
Yes, I definitely agree, friend. And, this topic around adulthood and creativity is something that is ever evolving for us. This is only like the surface of this conversation, because it continues to evolve even in this podcast as we chat about creativity. And so I would love to hear, friend, as we work towards wrapping up, what is some advice that you want to share with others, or even yours, or a reminder to yourself, to encourage you to continue to tap into that creativity and tap into that inner desire to create?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I give myself this advice. I would give myself this advice. Is just really finding the meaning of creativity for myself and what that means, and identifying those ways that I can continue to express it. Like I mentioned earlier in the beginning of the episode, whether it's through writing, whether it's through my thought processes, whether it's through how I express specific phrases or words. But I do think that is advice that I want to give to myself. And I mean, if others feel like they resonate, I absolutely feel free to take that advice, but really defining what my own creativity means to myself. But what about you, friend? What advice would you give yourself or others in terms of, this topic that we're on?
Yeah, the advice that I would share is, and I'll talk a little bit just briefly, but when I was smaller, I never thought that I would be a salesperson. That was not something that in my brain I ever imagined. So life has continued to surprise me in terms of, my career and what I do on a day-to-day basis. And, sometimes speaking in front of a bunch of executives, like I continue to surprise myself. So I just really want to encourage myself to continue to imagine, bigger than even my own dreams. So, really nurture that creativity by continuing to, imagine the impossible and continue to break those barriers that I have for myself when it comes to expression and playfulness and joy. Because where I'm at today is not where I ever imagined I'd be. And so I would love to leave the audience with one last question, which is, how do you all hope to cultivate creativity in your day-to-day, even as adults? How do you hope to bring more playfulness, more joy, and more creation to your day-to-day basis?
Wow, that's a good question, friend. Thank you for tuning in. Creator Corner is a podcast production presented by the Ars Network. It is hosted by Dalia and Mary Figueroa. This podcast is edited and produced by Muhammad Abdullah Kawish.